So here we are now, establishing the ground from the point of view of the body, of the speech and the mind. And the ground is that we need some kind of a vision so that we could take care of ourselves on the path. And that vision establishes that at one point we do have a goal, and in the same time there is absolutely no goal at all, because our intrinsic nature is already there. It's already the goal. So this seemingly dual is not dual. So there is no dual between dual and non-dual. So it is that we do have this vision that at one point our true nature is completely free and isn't completely in touch intimately with all living beings, with all living things, with all phenomena, whatever we could imagine that is, from the past, the future, and the present, all together in a single point, in a single ticle, a single drop. So it means that the deepest realization of all the great beings and the very simple, basic, lost soul searching for the treasure and not finding it outside, because it is absolutely never anywhere out of what that being intrinsically is already. So we have established the view that the highest Yoga Tantra and the highest Mahamudra, the highest great perfection, Dzogchen, and the most simple path of pilgrim, just taking his stick and walking on the road and meeting people, meeting animals, meeting events, meeting sicknesses, meeting happiness, meeting joy, and meeting some bliss, and sometimes meeting some obstacles. All of that is the same. And so at one point we need a little bit of technique, don't we? So the technique is absolutely not some kind of a cultural entanglement into creating a persona of somebody who would be from whatever kind of conceptual attachment to some kind of a figure, like I am a shaman, I am a guru, I am a yogini, I am a dakini, I am a maha, shida, I am a pilgrim, whatever that is. Of course, you could at one point just acknowledge that you some kind of need to play around, but deeply inside establish the view that none of this has any kind of duration. It will disappear. It's not needed. It's just helping somehow the being that still believes he is needing things. And of course we can respect that. Why not? We can respect that at one point we still need things, and at the other point intrinsically that's not true. And the whole thing is always like that. So this is important. But then of course, as we are some kind of on a dual band, in and out, left and right, in front, behind, my father, my mother, my right eye, my left eye. Whatever we do as a human being, we have this tendency anyway. So we do understand that. We understand it's empty, and in the same time it's full. All of that we understand. But that's philosophical. What to do? So to do, it's not very complicated. Start by not killing, and start by not harming, and start by not lying, and start by not abusing, and start by not telling bad things about anybody. start by not probably talking too much, things that are not needed. Same thing, maybe you don't find how not to do these things, but you will find how not to do these things, because you will do the opposite. And of course, as all of these come from the mind, well, try to acknowledge when you have these thoughts of jealousy, or you have these thoughts of pride, and you have these thoughts of hatred, and you have these thoughts of resentment, and maybe you have these thoughts of very highly grasping desire. Just acknowledge it, because you cannot push them away. You can just let them dissolve in the nature of your presence when you are practicing. And that's the next step, isn't it, when we're going to get into the practice. Now we're still on the view, but we will. And how can we do that practice? Is that instead of killing, you give life. Instead of stealing, you give things. And you give the Dharma, and you give healing, and you give, even you can give some kind of a silent, why not? You can give the non-duality of just being naturally a good person, a decent person. You can give devotion towards the great beings, and in the same time they are you. So you give the great beings to everybody, because from your devotion you become some kind of a place where they manifest for all beings, because that is like giving sunshine in the dark, coolness, frozen situation where there would be no light. So you are that light and that warmness, and that it's not that you're trying to be something, it's not that you're pretending to be whatever, even if sometimes you do need sometimes to reassert your position. It's just because that's the way it is, deeply. The deep is simple. And so, of course, you start to understand that you may have some wrong views in your mind, and you can accept that. Why not? Everybody does. Why wouldn't you? Isn't it? And so you do your practice, and sometimes you start to acknowledge that beyond your concept and your emotion there is some kind of a presence, a very clear presence in space and time, and completely peaceful, that is somehow always there. But of course that's because we practice that we can notice it more. So it is not about becoming Tibetan or Indian, or because it's not about pretending that we know lots of languages, or it's not about getting grasping into any kind of cultural setup. It's just because in this dual band kind of existence you do need to create a frame, and that frame, it's going to be built like a mandala, it's going to be operational, you're going to create a dynamic on the basics of this mandala, and the mandala must return to chaos. It must be at one point destroyed, because that's not possible to sustain forever, because it's just a way of creating from some kind of a theater set up an experience that is the essence of why we created the theater. In this case, we are not victim of the theater, we are fully engaged in that theater, which is quite different actually than being the victim of the theater, is when we believe everything that happens is completely the way it seems to be. So I'm not saying that things are not the way they are, I'm saying that the way we perceive them makes them seem very different. So when you establish the view that if we would admit that in the Buddhist proposition You're not relying on some kind of savior. You're not relying on the idea that you were created by God or that God is helping you, but you just understand that this is part of what we tend to believe in or to wish for. But at one point we're just coming back to the ground zero, which is just to quit a little bit controlling everything, except controlling the fact that you could just do nothing at one point, and let your body opened enough so that the life can live and flow from all of the space of that body presents, all that energy and all that space, emptiness that is why this is possible. Because the body, if it has no space, would have absolutely no way of staying alive. So the mind is the same thing. The mind is the whole of space, which is the whole of everything, as it is not solid. That's the mind. The energy is because this is alive. So the energy in the point of view of your body it's not the body itself. It's things coming in and going out and remaining alive in some kind of a warmth. That warmth is life. It's some kind of a gift. It's a mandala. It will, as all mandalas, return to the dissolution of all the different parts. So you play the game of that mandala. As a pilgrim in Ayana, Theravada, the beginning of your path, you have your stick, you're traveling, and you're meeting stuff, people, situations, emotions, beliefs. And all of these become the reminder. It's very much still some kind of a materialistic vision, and you are alone. And you are alone with this basic, very raw truth about being yourself, physically present in the world. You were dropped from your mother's womb. You were taken care of, otherwise you would not be alive. So this gratefulness for whoever has been making you here now, and in the same time, since then you are alone. So that's the Inayana Theravada, and you are doing this pilgrimage because you want to get free. And what is it you want to get free from? You want to get free from ignoring your own true nature, but as you don't really know the way to get there without moving around, you are walking from one place to the other, just as the Buddha did. And it helps because at one point, of course, this is metaphorically. I'm not telling you take your stick and you go away from home. It could happen, why not? But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that metaphorically you are a pilgrim. And so maybe you take your breakfast and then there's a bird, and that's the meeting, and that's a practice. And you are very much a pilgrim that is aware of the journey, and in the same time taking note of how this every moment phenomena is giving you messages. So in this case, you're not relating too much into helping other people, you're not relating too much into telling other people whatever it is, and you're not relating that much into anything else than loosen up a little bit this ego trip. And how do you do that? Well, you give life instead of killing, you give things instead of stealing, you give love instead of raping, you give a nice speech, if it's possible, or silence, instead of yelling or lying or saying bad things about people. You respect the sound of your voice and maybe appreciate the silence so that you can hear your own voice. Then you can also hear the voices of animals, of peoples, of things, of teachings. And from the point of view of your mind, you sit and you meditate and you just follow your breath. You give space in your body so that your body is not in a situation that the energy is blocked. That's nothing special. You can also walk. And then you have a support that you know it's artificial, but you need it for now, which is to give to your mind some kind of a support that you could attach your mind to that, so that your mind doesn't run away or run after things which are thoughts, beliefs, dreams. And in the same time, don't tighten too much your mind, because if the mind is too tight, it becomes a little bit stiff, and maybe even it could become a little bit crazy. Just let it a little bit free, and in the same time, always the support is there. So like if it's your breath, you feel you're breathing in and you're breathing out, and as you breathe out, it's like some kind of liberation, and you breathe in naturally because your body does that, and you breathe out, which is releasing. And whatever happens in your mind, it's okay, just come back to that. That's a very basic instruction, and it's quite enough. That is the instruction. Whatever is add up to that is not the shamatha shine in Tibetan, which is to remain in the peaceful non-activity of giving to your mind some kind of a place to relax. That place is the breath, but it could be something that you're looking at. Don't look at it too tightly. Look at whatever you look at with relax. Relax in your eyes. Sometimes if you want to relax your eyes, you can put both of your hands on one hand on the right, the other hand on the left, and your eyes can see both. And if your eyes can see both of the hands on the left, on the opposite right, then you have to relax your gaze. So this is some kind of a panoramic presence, and then in there is a specific thing. Maybe it could be a candle, or it could be whatever you like. It could be a statue, it could be a feather, it could be a sacred object, could be a shell. And you just relax your mind on that. But you're not looking at it with a closed eye. You're looking at it with this eye that relaxes. So the eye is not really looking at anything. It's some kind of gazing backwards in your neck. So that gives you some kind of a really free way of seeing, of looking. You can do it with your ears if it's not with your eyes. You can have the silence and the birds, for example, because it brings you back to presence. It could happen that you have all of these in the same time if you are practicing since a long time. You can also use the contact between your two thumbs, the thumbs, when you're in the posture of the mudra of Amitabha, and your two thumbs are not squeezing each other, they're not either falling apart of each other, but there's a very subtle touch between the two thumbs, and then you dissolve your body from the top and down, and you dissolve the legs, you dissolve the head, the neck, the thorax, the upper part of the body, and then you dissolve the arms and the belly, and all of the body starts to dissolve, and the arms dissolve, and the hands dissolve, and then only this spot between your two thumbs would be that place where your mind relaxes. Not too much squeezing, not too much falling apart. And then at one point when there's nothing left, then the touching between the two thumbs, you just remind yourself before you let go that this sensation is not a sensation, and it's not in a specific place. So you get free from the idea that this is your thumbs. It's easier than you think. It's just that spot between your thumbs, between the sensation of the two thumbs, becomes the support of your mind, and it's not in any specific place, and it's not specifically the thumbs. It's just a support, like a dot. And you relax. That's very important. So all of this helps your mind to find its own autonomy in the tendency of excitement and confusion, and also the tendency of chaotic behavior. So the energies will follow the mind because that's what they do. So of course when we say mind, you have the mind that is full of things, that is what we call ego. Ego is not like some kind of thing that exists, it's just some kind of a belief. So it doesn't exist anyway, but it is needed from the perspective of survival of your body as a child, for example, so that you defend yourself, for example, from putting your hand on a fire because it burns. So the reflex of taking your hand away from the fire is the reflex of preservation of that life you have. It's just a reflex, it's not your true nature. So this is what we're talking about. We're not saying that you should leave your hand in the fire. We're saying that ultimately there's no fire, there's no hand. The two things are happening at the same time. Remember, it's a dual band that is not dual. And so this ego thing is just a reflection. It's just at one point becoming an overwhelming fear, because once it was the hand on the fire, and then it was this, and then it was that, and at the end everything is about survival, and it's not anymore just the basic need from the point of view of the body itself. It became some kind of a craziness, insanity. So that's what we call ego. So when your mind relaxes and has a place to relax and has a place to rely on, it does experience itself. And in that case, it's not the mind that is full of coming and going and object. It is the mind perceiving its own nature, free from the objects that are contained in the perceptions of the mind. The objects that are contained could be dreams, could be also physical things. It could be hopes and fears. So all of that is released naturally, because as soon as the mind starts to enjoy relaxing, it enjoys also to meet its own nature. And that is when you start to feel that you are getting completely like being free. It could last just for a little second or a little minute or maybe more, but slowly it can last more. So this is why your path is progressive, and in the same time it is completely immediate. because when that happens, it happens really, and then it comes back. It's like if you had a paper that you would roll up the paper very tightly for 10 years, and then when you open the paper, it unrolls itself again. So that's what happens with us. That's what we call habitual tendencies. But it's not impossible. You just open the paper again and then open it again, and slowly it will relax, and slowly it will not enroll itself anymore. So that's how you do it. So you understand, when you open the paper, that was immediate, and when it rolls itself again, it's becoming progressive. So we were in that part that you were on Inayana, you are the pilgrim, and then you work on your body, and this is how you start. And you need some techniques, and in the same time you have the vision that you're not getting more entangled into identification with some kind of a fancy yourself, or some of a poor yourself, which is exactly the same at the end. And you also learned about the 8 dharma, mundane dharmas, so you behave, being careful about them. In the same time, just relax, because you don't avoid easily these 8. I talked about them in a previous talk. And then slowly, slowly you start to open to the Mahayana, because you can't help yourself from the fact that as you're not killing and you're not lying and you're not abusing, you're starting to relate with people, and you're relating with animals, and you're relating with situations, and so you do enter the Mahayana, whatever you do, because that's what happens when you meditate a lot, is that things become much wider, vast, big. That's the Mahayana, which means the great vehicle. You're starting to relate with situations, people and things as a bodhisattva, which means that you are taking them along on your path as being also free in themselves. And your action, your activity, your existence is all together in the direction of that freedom of others and yourselves as not separated. So it's just like that naturally. You can't help that at one point that will happen. And of course, when that happens, it changes a little bit things, because you're not anymore only taking care of yourself. But in the same time, just don't forget that whenever you're taking care also of others, don't make that another way of doing the ego trip, because that's what could happen. And why? The 8 dharma, the 8 mundane dharmas, that's what they do. It's again this always the same thing, actually. It's never different. It's because at one point we found an identification which would be to become so generous and so nice and so wonderful and so moralistic and so patient and so wise and so whatever that is that we believe is virtuous, and that becomes non-virtuous because we are again establishing an identification with some kind of a play. We have agendas. These agendas are usually very easy to find out, because it's always about fear and it's always about hope. I'm not saying that you are hopeless. I'm saying that hope is absolutely just an illusion. There's nothing to hope for and there's nothing to fear. But at the same time, as we are going along on the path, we do have hope and fear. So we just need to relax in relationship with the paper that you open and it closes again. And so this Mahayana thing will bring you slowly into the magic of the world, which is the Vajrayana. But I'm not going to talk about that today. The Vajrayana is much more relating with the world of energies from the dream world, which is the consciousness in its subtle creativity. And so that's why when you enter the Vajrayana, you're going to really need, some, like Ariane in the Greek tradition, she has this string to go in the labyrinthic. You will need your string to find the way out, because otherwise the subtle worlds of archetypa and dreams, and if you don't go carefully in there, helping yourself with art and with maybe ritual, or maybe your art is very important, like singing, painting, dancing, because that's how you can always, in the same time, work with the imagination and also the insight, which is true imagination, and in the same time not get cut off of the basic, very raw reality of your body presence. So you don't get crazy completely. You can have some crazy wisdom, but you're not crazy. So that's all for today. This was the rising sun.